I want to talk about the importance of decentralization, especially around infrastructure. So everyone is very familiar, if you're familiar with Bitcoin, around decentralized money. I think it's pretty clear as to why there's significant advantage to Bitcoin being decentralized rather than centralized. But one of the things that we've seen is all of the infrastructure, or most of the infrastructure, especially up until recently, has been centralized around Bitcoin. There's a number of other places in the market where there's been decentralized infrastructure or decentralized applications being built, but Bitcoin specifically, most of it that has been built in terms of the exchanges, the custody providers, the lending, platforms, all of that has been centralized. And so maybe just kind of give us a quick high level overview of like, why do you see the infrastructure and the applications around Bitcoin being so important as decentralized versions? And then kind of how do you evaluate where we are today outside of what you're building?
Right. I think that's a great question. For me, the magic of Bitcoin, I didn't get into Bitcoin because I wanted to get wealthy. I got into Bitcoin because I wanted to improve the world. Specifically, I thought it was important for people not to be enslaved to a financial system where they were out of control, right? Bank could confiscate their funds, the government could confiscate their funds could be censored. And part of this is due to the experiences that I'd experienced. And so the magic for me about Bitcoin is that it is this revolution in creating liberty, a sovereign monetary system available to everyone in the world, but it's dressed up as a get-rich-quick scheme, so it gets adoption. And the frustrating thing throughout the years, and I think this is, I think back to the conversations I was having in, let's call it 2015 with Bitcoiners. Everyone was sure that we were going to have decentralized exchanges, decentralized lending, basically all of the financial services around Bitcoin would be decentralized. And the reason was obvious. You have this amazing decentralized, permissionless, uncensorable monetary asset. And if you then, have to use it through a centralized service, you give up all of those properties. So the exchanges get hacked, the exchanges require KYC, the exchanges become regulated. And Bitcoin loses the very properties that it has that made people want it in the first place. What I think happened over time is people discovered that it's difficult to decentralize Bitcoin in a responsible way. It was easier to start building decentralized projects on Ethereum and other services. And then over the last few years, we've seen the explosion of DeFi. Now, DeFi has sort of the Ponzinomics part of it, right? Where people are just kind of looking for 200% APY yield and creating token upon token upon token. And that's sort of the noise. But the fundamental value it provides is phenomenal. The fundamental value of decentralized finance is the ability to retain your control over your keys, over your asset, even as you begin to lend, transact, and create a new financial system. And so I think the thing that we need to give credit to Ethereum for is reawakening the interest among Bitcoiners in creating this decentralized finance, giving us the feeling that it is now within our grasp. And in conversations that I started having earlier last year, and particularly after the pandemic hit, more and more people who I'd known in this, in the Bitcoin space for years, started talking about their frustration that there wasn't DeFi for Bitcoin. And I think to me, having decentralized applications for Bitcoin is a necessary step in all of the things that imagine Bitcoin being able to achieve. That hyper-Bitcoinization means you're going to have a financial system based on Bitcoin. The way you do that is by having a decentralized financial system. Retaining your control over your keys can only be done in a decentralized financial system. And having permissionless innovation in finance can only be done in a decentralized financial system. So I think if we want to see Bitcoin achieve its full potential, it has to have a cloud of decentralized financial services around it.
So before we go any further in terms of that decentralized infrastructure, the term permissionless innovation, I think is one that doesn't get evaluated enough or discussed. Talk a little bit more about like what does permissionless innovation mean and why is that important?
Yeah, so I think almost everyone's seen the charts where the cost of education has just gone up and up and up. The cost of housing has just gone up and up and up. The cost of healthcare has just gone up and up and up. But at the same time, the cost of computers has gone down. The cost of services that are provided digitally has gone down. Google is free. Facebook is free. Why that weird bifurcation? And I think the reason is that some industries have permissionless innovation. In other words, anyone can become a competitor. Anyone can challenge the incumbents. And some industries are so protected by regulation that entry into those industries is impossible. The incumbents never need to change because nobody can compete with them. And as a result, they become more expensive and worse year after year. The worst example of this is the financial system, right? The big banks, the large financial institutions have hardly had to compete at all. And they've hardly, we still have bank branches because they've felt the need to figure out how to provide us with a fully digital experience. And most recently, with the whole Wall Street's bet saga, we saw that when somebody actually does create a model which may compete with it, right, it allows people to, try something like shorting, squeezing the hedge funds. The regulators, in concert with the large financial institutions, can basically turn it off. So the reason that permissionless innovation is so important is because without permissionless innovation, you actually don't have competition. And the reason permissionless innovation in finance is so important is because Facebook is cool, right? Like talking to friends is very important. Searching for information is very important. But at the end of the day, we all spend 8 to 10 hours every single day working for money. We all purchase the things that we want with money. We all manage the security of our futures and our family's futures with our finances. We basically express ourselves and our deepest desires and needs in the way that we manage our finances more than any other thing that we do. And so if there's one place that we need to be free, one place that if we're not free, they can really squeeze us, it's our finances. And that's why permissionless innovation in finance is probably more important than any other single field.
So today, decentralized infrastructure is basically, there's two schools of thought. One is that we are going to take Bitcoin, which is decentralized money, and we are going to bring it into the Ethereum or other smart contract platforms. There's things like wrapped Bitcoin and many variations of that. The other is that we're going to build new decentralized infrastructure on Bitcoin and around Bitcoin, not including those smart contract platforms. How do you break down that framework? How do you evaluate what is most likely to work? And then we can, after we go through that, get into exactly what you're building, but just walk us through kind of philosophically or theoretically how those two different worlds, is it a zero-sum game? One wins, one doesn't? Is it coexistence? How do you view this?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll start with the end, whether or not it's a zero-sum game. I think that's a very dangerous approach for us to take because it creates the tribalism that we've seen. And the reason that the tribalism or sort of the Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus BCH versus Ripple, right, we're all enemies. The reason that bothers me so much is because I think what we're trying to accomplish is extremely difficult and extremely ambitious. We're trying to take on all of the governments of the world and replace these fiat currencies with a sovereign currency where we the people are in control, right? So all of the established powers of the world are arrayed against us. And I think it's going to take all of our concerted efforts to be able to achieve our goal. So I don't want to create situations. I don't think it's good that we create situations where there's an opportunity for divide and conquer amounts. That said, I think for us to come together, we should come together around one monetary asset. And I think that monetary asset needs to be the one which has the best chance of becoming the new currency, the new reserve currency of the world. And I think that's unquestionably Bitcoin. I think I think ultimately this entire industry it moves with Bitcoin, right? We talk about the price of DeFi going up, and then people have all kinds of theories about why DeFi is going up or why the price of Ethereum is going up or whatever, right? But we know why they're going up. It's because the price of Bitcoin is going up. It's the center of gravity. And if it goes down, everything else will go down as well. So now to the first part of your question, right? So, okay, so where do we build DeFi? Do we build it on Ethereum? Do we try and build it on other systems? I think that if you look at what's happening with DeFi for Bitcoin, which to my mind is the most important type of DeFi, right? Because Bitcoin is the most important asset. DeFi for Bitcoin hardly exists, or maybe doesn't exist at all, on Ethereum. The vast majority of Bitcoin on Ethereum is wrapped Bitcoin, which is basically you go to a company called BitGo, you give them your coins, you lose control over those coins, and then they give you a token representing coins that sit in their vault. So maybe you can use DeFi systems, but you can't use DeFi. So if we want to build DeFi for Bitcoin, it has to be built in a Bitcoin native way. It has to be built on the Bitcoin ecosystem, secured by the Bitcoin miners. And the way that you use this Bitcoin should be as trustless as possible. And for that, I think we need to use Bitcoin layer 2 solutions. And that's why I got so interested in Sovereign, which is a form of DeFi being built on Bitcoin layer 2.